Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yep, here I be, August 3. And sunny Thursday, as I speak, the final day of the trial that took forever is happening downtown. And Mr. Bowers is being officially told he has been sentenced to death by a jury, and I believe is going to have to listen to people speaking directly to him who were affected by his crimes. I assume that will be an exercise that will have no effect on him whatsoever. So in that respect, it's futile, but it may provide some succor to the speakers. I can't imagine. I can't imagine talking to him. So here's the thing. I was glad to hear they sentenced him to death. Here's my guess. He will not be executed. And I don't know how much people have focused on that, but the feds are not executing anybody. This is what, after Trump left office, he had a killing spree right at the end of his tenure. Killed as many prisoners as he could, I guess. And then when Biden assumed the presidency, he put in a moratorium, I believe, on how the U.S., how the feds do, in fact, execute the execution of people. And while that study is going on, there is a hold, a moratorium on any executions. And this is something also that the Justice Department, which certainly doesn't have anything else to do, right, as the Justice Department investigates all of the procedures around the federal death penalty. And, also the appeal process begins, which also, I don't know. I do know that I sort of bristle when people say, well, I hope this brings some closure or some sense of, whatever. What could it possibly do? I mean, it's better than somebody going free, right? Yes. But other than raising the dead, I don't know what could possibly bring solace. I do think that having had the trial was important in that it provided a very copious historical and legal record of this historic and heinous massacre. So right now, it just blows my mind that as I speak, that man is listening to people who feel more than he is capable of feeling, and who, I guess, are trying to tell him what the impact of his violence on their lives and the lives of their family, and he's incapable of comprehension. I've never seen any or read anywhere that he has shown any emotion. He has no affect. He's just, I don't know. At least he won't be able to kill anybody. So, the other big story is the aforementioned former president will be, of course, back in court today to be indicted yet again. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what we're seeing play out? I think we are in so many ways benumbed, as we have been ever since this horror of a human came down that escalator. To be held in thrall by any person is not what one wants. A loss of agency, a loss of self, but to be held in thrall by a monstrous, vicious cipher like this man. In many respects, I look at him not unlike I look at Robert Bowers, the mass murderer. They are both men with no ability, none, to feel, other than their own pain. Anyway, so he'll be back in court, I guess, this afternoon, and I guess this will go rather quickly since they already have him in the system. He's already in there. They got all the information. So there you go. The New York Times editorial board was roused to write an editorial on this historic indictment. And in case you haven't seen it, I'm going to read little bits of it to you, just a little. I think they got it right. The problem is when the editorial board speaks, it doesn't have a lot of personality. Anything done by committee lacks, usually, a voice, frankly. But I think, in its sort of cold way, it lays things out pretty. And the headline is "A President Accused of Betraying His Country," and understand that that's exactly what the indictment is, and it is hence historic because no other president in our history has come close to the level of betrayal that this man evidenced. Okay, so some of what I just thought was worthy of some repetition on my part. The Times editorial board says the criminal justice system of the United States had never seen an indictment of this magnitude. It's the first time that a former president has been explicitly accused by the federal government of defrauding the country. It is the first time a former president has been accused of obstructing an official proceeding, the congressional count of the electoral votes. Mr. Trump also stands accused of engaging in a conspiracy to deprive millions of citizens of the right to have their votes counted. This fraud, the indictment said, led directly to a deadly attack by Mr. Trump's supporters on the seat of American government. And I think that pretty much lays it out as we know. The thing as you read anything about this, is that it was done in broad daylight. It was covered as it happened on the news. We watched the attempt as it played out. We watched the lies be voiced and carried on the news. We watched this whole thing. Now, granted, January 6th was the pow. That was perhaps the most riveting thing we watched. But we watched this whole thing. It is not as though they were, and it's always been the case with this crowd, they're not subtle. They just do it. So much of the indictment reads like, yeah, right. I mean, as you read it, you're like, yeah, well, we know that. What's historic is it's finally being put together in this way and added up one thing after the other to equal a crime, a conspiracy, a betrayal. Back to the Times editorial. The prosecution's list of false voter fraud claims made by Trump and his associates is extensive. Now, these are the things that played out on the news for us all, right? And here they are. That 10,000 dead people voted in Georgia. That there were tens of thousands of double votes in Nevada. 30,000 non-citizens voting in Arizona. And boy, here's where we top it all. And 200,000 mystery votes in Pennsylvania. And that's not even counting all those so-called voting dumps, malfunctioning voting machines, and, nefarious poll watchers, whoever, these hapless volunteers who got caught up in the lying. All of this played out right in front of us. And it was all false. These were all lies. And the indictment specifically emphasizes that all the lawsuits filed by Trump and his cohort of liars, every single one of them was just immediately rejected by every court that they found themselves in. Presided over by conservative jurists, liberal jurists, Trump's own appointed jurists. It didn't matter. Trump was told over and over again that these claims were lies and absolutely meritless. Now let's think of people who get their news from Fox. Do they know that? No, they don't. They don't know it. Because Fox was a purveyor as well. You wish they could be criminally punished in the same way for aiding and abetting the undermining of American democracy. And then I have to say that in reading again, I see that this is an apology to the Wall Street Journal headline writer. It turns out that yesterday I was on the Journal for saying, for their headline being that Trump was indicted on a scheme, election scheme. I thought, how about the word, felonies, crimes? And it turns out that Smith, in his indictment, does use at one point the word criminal scheme. Just want to say. And then just two other things from the Times editorial. The scope of Trump's plot touched every level of American political life. While the 4 federal crimes that are charged all relate to the same set of facts, 3 of those crimes, 1 for fraud and 2 related to obstruction, are crimes against the U.S. government. The 4th crime is against the American people. And specifically those of us who lived in the states that they targeted with their lies. The 4th crime is against the American people, of whom Trump sought to deprive of their right to have their vote counted. Now, I have to say this. It's not just Trump who sought to deprive us of our vote. Even after the desecration of the Capitol on January 6th, even after people died that day, even after the terror and the tear gas had subsided somewhat and they went back to finishing the business of the day, certifying the electoral vote, right? Even after, an incredible number of members of that body, our elected representatives, all of them Republican, still refused to say that your vote and my vote should be counted, right? There was not unanimity. The Republicans held strong. None of them are going to face any kind of, it blows my mind when I think of the people who aided and abetted in every way this betrayal, this attempted coup, this deprivation of our rights, that they're going to walk. All of the legislators, the Congress people, the senators, they're going to walk. They're not going to be charged. I mean, when I think of some of them that are still sitting members of Congress that should also be facing criminal charges, God, I wish. Maybe someday. Anyway, back to the New York Times and its finale. This is the last paragraph. And they're talking about, again, the aiding and abetting of the members of Congress. And you'll recall that after January 6th, Trump was impeached again for exactly this. And that went to the Senate, where we knew, even though those senators had been terrorized that day, there's no way they were going to vote to convict him. And the New York Times writes, after he voted to acquit Trump, Senator Mitch McConnell said there were other ways to bring him to account. McConnell said, we have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation, and former presidents are not immune from being accountable by either one. The Times says, in that, at least, McConnell was right. A former president is now being charged with extreme abuse of office and will eventually be judged by a jury. Mr. Trump tried to overturn the nation's constitutional system and the rule of law. That system survived his attacks and will now hold him to account for that damage. And he could have been held to account by the jury known as the U.S. Senate in an impeachment inquiry. But unfortunately, that Senate had too many aiders and abettors in it, also known as Republicans. Two letters in the New York Times, letters to the editor today that I enjoyed, both of them really short, pithy. Andrew Roney from Teaneck, New Jersey, had a little fun remembering that Trump supposedly wrote a book once called The Art of the Deal, right? And Andrew Roney writes, after his third indictment, and one potentially still to come in Georgia, perhaps it's time for the former president to begin work on his next bestseller, The Art of the Plea Deal. All right. And this from Mackenzie Allen in Santa Fe. She writes, I'm almost 80 years old. I have no children and never will. However, if I did have kids, regardless of how many, whether boys or girls, I'd name them all Jack Smith. Oh, God. Isn't that like George Foreman named all? Didn't George Foreman name all his kids George or something? Didn't he? I mean, people have done such things. Oh, God. So, the news, we've been, it comes up quite often that the news is difficult. It's hard to ingest and still feel, any exuberance and sense that all is well with the world. And as a consequence, more and more people, and I think we know this anecdotally, but it also apparently is in fact true. More and more people are eschewing the news. They are tuning out. And they've just been overwhelmed. And I understand that. We all have been. I also fear that response, which is it's a response born of an attempt to sort of defend one's mental health, sometimes one's physical health, right, from the horror of too much knowledge. It's daunting, and I understand, and I have found myself, doing what I have to do. And I've told you, I do not watch much cable and or broadcast news, local or national or anything. It is rare. I do every once in a while, yes, tune in. But generally speaking, I don't. But I do read, and I can't not read. And I've been a news junkie all my life. But I understand why people would want to say, I can't do this anymore. And I've heard it from you. And what's worrisome is the very thing that is making us feel we can't take anymore is the very reason why turning away from it doesn't seem like the responsible thing to do. I mean, if things are going to hell in a handbasket and you are a citizen of a democracy, which is at threat, it would seem that your job is clear. Your responsibility as a citizen is clear. And that is not to tune out. Am I correct? Yeah. And if it's uncomfortable, if it causes you sleepless nights and the wringing of hands, well, but the Washington Post has a piece today about how if you are turning off the news, you are not alone. And they do a thing with people who were news junkies all their lives. People who, lived like I did. They read 2 newspapers a day. They, were watching the news. They totally kept up. And to quote one, I always felt I had a responsibility to know everything. I don't feel that way anymore. Now, that's, my guess is she still thinks it's important and it's the responsible thing to do. She just says it's taking too much of a toll on me and I'm opting out. And again, I understand that. I think people can take little respites, but I do think you have to return to the fray. Anyway, people are actually doing research on this. And for instance, the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, and that's based at Oxford. And they've been asking people all over the world for years and years now about how much news they're consuming. And their latest numbers show that 38% of Americans say that they sometimes or often avoid the news. 38%. And more women than men. And the number of people who say they are very interested in the news just keeps. Just in 2015, stop and think about this. This is before Trump, the year before Trump. That question was asked. Are you extremely or very interested in the news? Do you know how many Americans said, yeah? 67% of Americans in the sliver of time before Donald Trump came down that escalator, 67% said, yeah, I am. And since, that number has dropped to 49%, the lowest it's ever been. And it's interesting, the same holds true in the UK, where they're watching their country go to hell in a handbasket. And most of this is being driven by feelings of depression and helplessness and anxiety. And we can, I'm sure, all understand that. Here's another quote from another person who used to, but just can't anymore. What I find is the news is depressing. It feels like it affects me directly. I mean, I don't know if the world is worse now than it was before, but it never used to feel like a personal threat. Well, yeah, maybe it is worse given the climate stuff and the democracy crumbling stuff. And in fact, this woman, when asked, like, where do you, like, when you say feel helpless, what are you thinking of? And she says, gun violence, climate change denial, Trump. I just feel helpless. What can I do about it? Well, see, that's, I don't know. I think it's not, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I can see, just finding something that works for you, but you can't just because it causes you some anxiety. I mean, you can't bail, I don't think. But the fact is that ratings are down for the all TV news as well. People just, and I understand it. I'm one of the reasons that's happening. The New York Times was down 20% last month compared with a year ago. The Post, the Wall Street Journal, too, down their websites. People just can't. Now, the reality is that, of course, news is usually about things that have gone awry. And I mean, this is what news is and always was. It's not about all the airplanes that took off and landed. It's about that one that took off and crashed. That is always what news has been. And it's interesting what people choose, what news you choose to avoid. Like, I know what I choose to avoid when I'm reading, and the headline tells you, are you going to read that or aren't you? The news you avoid. I have found myself avoiding all the news that I know is just going to make the empath in me so miserable. And yet I can't do anything about it. Like, okay, so the horrors going on in another country, like the war in Ukraine, which I don't think is going real well. Again, stuff like that. I just sort of, I say, okay, that's it. Don't have to know about that. But when it comes to U.S., I feel like there's a responsibility there. You know what they find when they do this research? That conservatives are 5 times more likely to avoid news about climate change than liberals. I understand that. They don't want to believe it. And if they don't read about it, then maybe it isn't really happening. They can't believe it. They used to poo-poo it. I think they must see that obviously something here is going on, and 5 times more likely to avoid news about climate change than people who acknowledge its existence. They're also 3 times more likely, conservatives, to avoid stories about gender and race. You know, the stuff that sets them off, the stuff that they're scared of. Although we're scared of this shit too. Liberals are more likely than conservatives to avoid news about business. Believe that. Oh, that's funny. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about this, but I do think that, you know, journalism by its nature is has a negativity bias. It just does. But I don't know. Anytime people try to like balance things, and there have been efforts to like, how about we do a newscast with good news? That has happened here and there, and lasted all of a week or two anywhere. I mean, nobody, no matter what we say, we don't want to be fed a bunch of happy stuff. We don't. But I'm just saying. Washington Post today, do you avoid the news in growing company? You know where else, if you avoid your growing company, what else? Excuse me. Going to church. And I think that's known too, right? But it is really, really down. Let me find some, for instances. This was something that was written in the Atlantic. And this is a guy who is still going to church, and he's really worried because I guess increasingly he's sitting there pretty much by himself. And and the fact that it's a guy is interesting because I think it's women that are holding down the churches now. But he wrote this: nearly everyone I grew up with in my childhood church in Lincoln, Nebraska, is no longer Christian. Now that's mind-blowing. Stalwart, Midwestern, church-going people, and he says almost none of them even identify as Christian anymore. And he says, and believe it or not, that's not unusual, 40 million Americans have stopped attending church in the past 25 years. You know, I do want to say, if we're not attending church anymore and we're not watching the news or feeling like we have to know what's happening, what the hell are we doing? What are people doing now? They think engaged in the professional grind for a great part of people's lives, but I don't know. Communal activity is disappearing. Okay, so if 40 million Americans have stopped attending church just in the last 25 years, that represents the largest concentrated change in church attendance in American history. And this guy is freaking about it because he felt that the church and the community that it provided him and his children was really, really, really important. And here are the reasons that they're able to come up with. The abuses of the church coming to light. The sexual abuse in churches have driven lots of people away. But even a larger share say they've left church for things like, I just don't feel like getting up in the morning. It's just sort of, it's nothing specific. It's just something they see no value in. It doesn't get them ahead. It doesn't contribute to their professional life. or so they're blaming the fact that Americans are just concerned about themselves getting ahead and not concerned much anymore about promoting mutuality is the word they use. I don't know. Throwing it out there. We have a caller. Hello.
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 Yes. About the church thing again. I believe in something. I just don't. I never believed, which I think they've got it all wrong. People go to church. I don't care if you go to church. If that makes you feel good, and that's what your thing is, that's great. Good for you. It makes you feel better. But it is not going to church. It's how you live your life. That's the important part. If you go to church and you're a rotten son of a bitch, what good is it? So it's how you live your life. If you believe in this going to heaven and all, it's how you live your life. So if you don't live a good life, church ain't going to do you much good. So that's how I always believe it. So I don't go to church. I used to. I can pray on my own. I don't have to have church to pray. Sabbath isn't church. It could be anything. It could be in your garage. Just because the church tells you that doesn't mean religion. Religion's got it wrong in so many ways. That's why I don't go, because I don't believe in the way they think. I don't believe in this angry God and all this stuff, this brim and firestone and brim, or what do you call it? I don't believe in all that stuff. I believe in a compassionate, caring God, if I do believe. And I somewhat believe, but I'm not sure. I have a lot of questions. But this whole thing about church, that's fine. If it makes you feel good inside, go. But I don't think that's the end all. I really don't. I don't know why people. And another thing, I don't like people saying, I can worry about the community and this is how. That's your belief. So what you're doing is you're pushing your belief that you go to church. Well, everybody else should go. No, this is a free country. It's independent. If they don't want to go to church, you don't go to church. If you're an atheist, it doesn't make you worse. It's just, our country seems to always want to tell one another how to live, and it really drives me nuts, because we're supposed to be representing freedom, but we tell everybody what to do. We get mad because this person does that, and that's not what it's about. This is America. We're supposed to be independent and free, but we don't live that way. We really don't.
Well, yeah, but we were, those pilgrims and the folks who started people coming here were all about wanting to be in church.
Yeah.
And wanting to worship as they wanted to worship. Right.
Right.
So, yeah, church has always been a problem. And it just seems to be a big problem a lot. Okay, I absolutely agree with what you said about going to church doesn't make you a good person.
No, I mean, if it makes you feel good, great. Go. If you go bowling and it makes you feel good, go. That's how I feel about it. I mean, I'm not going to put it down, because it has some good things about it. Helps some people who are hungry, and there's things it does. Yeah, it has a purpose. I don't want to go,
I agree with you.
But,
totally.
That's how I feel about it. Okay.
Thank you.
See you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
I was going to say, bye. You're preaching to the choir. I don't, I sometimes wish that I felt like I wanted that kind of community, but I don't. I've taken little stabs at it here and there in my life. It just doesn't, it's not a fit for me. But for some people, the church, the synagogue, the mosque are central. It's the center of their social life in every way. And for those people, it can be just a wondrous thing. But they must be feeling more and more like, geez, where is everybody? And I don't know. I don't know what to say. Hey, a few little things before, run out of time here. I did see, and I want to point this out because I think it's really cool. It's a good thing. that, why am I blanking on his actual name? The Rock. Why am I blanking? God dang it. Thank you, Dwayne Johnson. Thank you, Kevin. That gorgeous hunk of man, The Rock. He gave $1 million to the Screen Actors Guild Defense Fund or Relief Fund. Actually, is I think what it's properly called, because most people who belong to SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, are not in a position to give away $1 million like the likes of Dwayne Johnson. The Rock. So his donation of $1 million was sort of like throwing. I don't think he publicized it a lot, but I think people in the union did, and they let other stars know what he had done. Because for many people, this strike means there's no money, none coming in. They got to pay rent. They've got to feed themselves and their kids, and that's where a union needs money to help them. So he gave $1 million, and then because he started that ball rolling, I don't think I have a whole list here, but the list I have has George Clooney then did, Matt Damon gave $1 million, DiCaprio gave $1 million, Hugh Jackman, Nicole Kidman, Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively, Julia Roberts, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Meryl Streep, Oprah Winfrey. And there, I'm sure, are other, J-Lo, Ben Affleck as well. And that's, I'm adding that up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like $12, $13 million right there that'll help folks. But man, I can think of a lot more other probably people who could give, if not $1 million, you could give 500. Wow, I hope that the big boys and girls are going to step up so that the vast majority of their union comrades will be able to hold out and win this strike. Okay, just saying. And then something that I haven't found, the need to talk about, but somebody wrote about it today and reminded me. It has to do with Biden's dog. Biden's dog. You might have read that his dog, what's his name? Commander, had bitten more than one Secret Service member. And I think in some cases, really, really bit them. So what I got, I thought, wait a minute. Commander is the dog that's biting? The fact is since Biden's been in the White House, which is not even 3 years, this is the third dog he's had that's been exiled, sent back to Delaware or something for biting, right? The first one was what's his name? Champ, and then Major. Remember those guys? I think the first one was okay, and then Major came and was freaked out, and he started biting. I don't know. All I know is it says here that those two were already sent back, were exiled from the White House because they were biting people there. And that's a few years ago now we got it. That dog is, when are they going to learn? I got news for you, Biden. You got a cat there too, right? Just stop with the dogs. I know it's a picture that, yes, the president has a dog. Only Trump would never have had a dog. But I just don't think, and this is what this article's about, the White House is not a good place for a dog. And if a dog does find itself living in that place, then it better be about the most emotionally intelligent and secure canine on earth, because that's a crazy place for a dog to live. And the person who wrote this piece is the head of the dog cognition lab at Barnard College. So she's somebody who gets into dogs' heads and tries to figure out, if you're a dog, how are you assessing a situation. And she says, this is just a ridiculous environment for a dog. And you betcha they're biting. And they're not always being aggressive when they're biting, but they're exhibiting their anxiety and concern. I mean, a lot of dogs feel they have to protect. I can see why they're biting the Secret Service. I mean, both think they're supposed to be doing the same thing, protecting Jill. And I can see where the dog gets confused. And this woman did a little research, and she found out that dogs in the White House generally end up biting people. I don't remember hearing about Obama's dogs biting people, but what do I know? But they say Teddy Roosevelt, bull terrier, tore the pants off the French ambassador. Apparently, FDR at one point had a German Shepherd that was exiled after biting the British Prime Minister. They don't say that's Churchill, but I would imagine that was Churchill. And so, I just want to say that poor dog, let him be in a place in a normal, relatively normal environment. She says this: many sweet, laid-back dogs living as pets in our homes might be stressed to the point of developing a lively biting habit if they lived in the White House. Faced with so many people, so much noise, so many eyes directed at them, handling by different people, lacking the typical dog, straightforward daily routine. I mean, there's no way. This is extremely anxiety-producing environment for a dog. So I'm just saying this to the Bidens. If you're dog lovers, then don't bring them to the White House. Okay? Don't. The cat can handle the White House. A dog, it feels too much responsibility, probably, to the owners and to you. And anyway, biting is, this woman says, biting is not necessarily aggression on a dog's part. I mean, biting, just so you know, from 3 weeks of age, puppies are biting, which is to say they are using their mouths to explore the world. If they are growing up around other dogs, they very likely are going to bite those dogs too, and then learn from the response what happens when they bite too hard. That is right. And then dogs, as they develop, learn. But a dog can't handle the White House. If a dog is not properly socialized in early life, exposed to other dogs and people and other animals that they might be living with, they're not going to get the kind of feedback and experience that will allow them to be perceived as a good dog. She really takes issue with the fact that this binary way that we talk about dogs, good dog or bad dog, and very little in between. So, I don't know. She says this, and I just want to say that she's right. We are holding dogs to standards that they cannot possibly understand. Nothing is funnier than people talking to dogs, like trying to teach them, when they talk to them like people, like full sentences and the dog, you see the dog like, poor sweet soul, incapable, obviously, of understanding this babble coming out of the human, but trying so hard. It's just, oh God, help them. I've been thinking though, the dog I live with he's just so perfectly Darwinian socialized to be a human companion. He gives so much to me, including poison ivy. But I was thinking, it's just wondrous how they have made themselves so indispensable to us. And I was thinking, man, if the robots go after us, find us to be unnecessary and superfluous, then that doesn't bode well for dogs either. Because I got to tell you, a robot wouldn't give two hoots about a dog. And there's the difference. They might be smarter. And that's so. So I worry. And I was telling my dog, I hate to tell you this, but the robot overlords are coming. And not looking good for us humans. And if we go down, you guys are right behind us. I'm just telling you. Okay, that's my happy news for the day. And I wish you it's my weekend starts now. I wish you a good weekend, and I'll see you Monday, which seems so far away to me right now, but it's bound to like pop up in a blink, much to my chagrin, next Monday. Okay, thank you so much. Be well.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.